into the woods. I never thought I'd be telling this story. Even now, as I write, my hands tremble, and the memories are almost too vivid to recount. But you need to know what happened, if only to serve as a warning. Emily and I had been planning our camping trip for months. We both needed an escape from our hectic lives, and the thought of spending a weekend in the tranquility of Pine Hollow was too tempting to resist. The forest was rumored to be vast and untouched, a perfect getaway from the incessant noise of the city. We arrived late Friday afternoon, the sun already beginning its descent behind the tall pines. The drive had been long but scenic, winding through backcountry roads that seemed to lead us deeper into the heart of nature with every mile. When we finally reached our designated campsite, a sense of peace washed over us. We were far from civilization, enveloped in the embrace of the forest. Setting up camp was a breeze. We pitched our tent on a flat patch of ground, gathered firewood, and soon enough, a small fire was crackling, casting dancing shadows around our little clearing. We settled into the rhythm of the woods, cooking dinner over the open flame and listening to the symphony of chirping crickets and rustling leaves. As night fell, the forest took on a different character. The shadows grew longer, and the trees seemed to close in around us. The sounds of the forest at night were both soothing and eerie, a reminder that we were not alone. We sat close to the fire, sharing stories and laughter, feeling the stress of our daily lives melt away. It was a perfect evening, and for a while we forgot our worries entirely. It was around midnight when the first unsettling sound reached us. A low, guttural growl, unlike anything I'd ever heard. Emily and I froze, our conversation cutting off abruptly. I grabbed the flashlight and shone it into the woods, but the light barely penetrated the thick darkness. "Probably just a coyote," I said, trying to reassure both of us. Emily nodded, though her eyes remained wide and alert. We decided to call it a night. As we lay in our tent, the growl echoed again, closer this time. My heart pounded in my chest. I held Emily close, whispering comforting words that did little to calm my own nerves. Eventually, exhaustion overtook us, and we fell into a fitful sleep. I woke up to the sound of Emily screaming. It took a moment to orient myself, to realize that the tent was shaking violently. Outside, something large was moving around, growling and snarling. I grabbed the flashlight and unzipped the tent, stepping out into the cold night air. What I saw still haunts my dreams. A creature, tall and emaciated, with long limbs and glowing red eyes, stood at the edge of our campsite. Its skin was a mottled gray, stretched tight over sharp bones, and its mouth hung open, revealing rows of jagged teeth. "Emily, run," I shouted, my voice barely above a whisper. She scrambled out of the tent, and we bolted into the woods, the creature hot on our heels. Branches whipped at our faces, and the darkness was disorienting. I could hear the creature's heavy footsteps behind us, its growls growing louder. Just when I thought it would catch us, we burst into a clearing, and I saw the lights of a small cabin ahead. We pounded on the door, screaming for help. An elderly man answered, his eyes wide with shock as he saw the terror on our faces. He let us in and bolted the door behind us. "What happened?" he asked, his voice trembling. "We were attacked," I gasped, struggling to catch my breath. "There's something out there." The old man nodded slowly, his expression grim. "I've heard the stories, but I never thought." He shook his head. "You're safe here. For now." Emily and I spent the rest of the night in that cabin, too scared to sleep. The old man kept watch, his shotgun at the ready. As dawn broke, he agreed to help us get back to our car. The walk back to the campsite was tense. The forest, once serene, now felt oppressive, filled with unseen dangers. When we reached our site, everything was destroyed. The tent was shredded, our supplies scattered. We didn't waste any time. We grabbed what we could and made a beeline for the car. As we sped down the dirt road, the sense of relief was overwhelming. We had escaped, or so we thought. It wasn't until we reached the outskirts of the nearest town that we noticed the claw marks on the car doors. Deep, jagged grooves that hadn't been there before. Emily and I exchanged a horrified glance, but we didn't dare stop. We found a police station and told our story. The officers were skeptical, but they agreed to investigate. They escorted us back to Pine Hollow, but when we arrived, there was no trace of the creature. No evidence of our encounter. We left the forest behind, vowing never to return. But the nightmare was far from over. Weeks later, strange things began happening at home. Scratches on the walls, growls in the night. We moved, hoping to escape whatever had followed us, but it was no use. The last straw came when we woke up one night to find those same glowing red eyes staring at us through our bedroom window. We fled, leaving everything behind. Now we live in constant fear, always on the move, never staying in one place too long. Our lives became a nightmare. We moved from city to city, staying in motels, friends' houses, and even camping out in other forests, always hoping to outrun the thing that pursued us. Every time we thought we were safe, we'd hear the growling again, or find fresh claw marks on our belongings. We tried to find help, searching for experts in cryptids and paranormal activity. Most dismissed us as lunatics or con artists. Only one man, a retired professor of folklore, seemed to take us seriously. His name was Dr. Harold Thorne, and he had spent his life studying legends and myths from around the world. "You say it followed you from Pine Hollow?" he asked, his eyes narrowing as he listened to our story. "Yes," I replied. "We thought we escaped, but it keeps finding us." Dr. Thorne nodded thoughtfully. "There's a legend about that area, about a creature called the Wendigo. It's said to be a spirit of insatiable greed and hunger that takes over a person and turns them into a monster. It feeds on fear and despair." "But we didn't do anything to provoke it," Emily said, her voice shaking. "Sometimes just being in the wrong place at the wrong time is enough," he said grimly. "The Wendigo is drawn to those who are vulnerable, those who are on the edge." He gave us some advice on protective charms and rituals, but I could see in his eyes that he didn't hold out much hope. Still, we followed his instructions, desperate for any kind of help. We hung charms around our temporary homes, burned sage, and performed rituals meant to ward off evil spirits. For a while it seemed to work. The growling stopped, and the claw marks disappeared. We began to hope that maybe, just maybe, we had finally escaped. We even dared to start rebuilding our lives, finding a small house in a quiet town far from Pine Hollow. But the peace didn't last. One night, as we sat in our living room, there was a knock on the door. I opened it to find a package on the doorstep. No return address, just our names scrawled in an unfamiliar hand. Inside was a piece of cloth, torn and blood-stained, with a note that simply read, "You can run, but you can't hide." The fear returned tenfold. We packed our bags and fled again, abandoning our new home and our fragile sense of safety. The following weeks were a blur of frantic movement, always looking over our shoulders, always expecting the worst. It was during one of our desperate moves that we met a woman named Marie. She was a friend of a friend, living in a remote cabin deep in the mountains. Marie was a practitioner of old magic, her knowledge passed down through generations. When she heard our story, she offered to help. "I've dealt with spirits like this before," she said, her voice calm and reassuring. "But it won't be easy. You have to confront it directly." Her plan was risky, but we were out of options. We followed her to the cabin, where she prepared for the ritual. The night was dark and moonless, the air heavy with anticipation. Marie led us into the forest, to a clearing surrounded by ancient trees. She lit a circle of candles and instructed us to stand in the center. As she chanted in a language I didn't understand, the air grew colder, and the shadows seemed to come alive. The growling began again, louder and more menacing than ever. The creature emerged from the darkness, its eyes glowing with malevolent hunger. It circled us, just outside the ring of candles, its growls vibrating through my bones. "Stand your ground," Marie commanded. "Do not break the circle." The Wendigo lunged at us, but an invisible barrier held it back. It howled in frustration, its red eyes burning with fury. Marie continued her chant, her voice rising above the creature's roars. The tension was unbearable. I could feel the creature's anger, its desire to break through and tear us apart. But Marie's magic held, and slowly, the Wendigo began to weaken. Its growls became whimpers, its form flickering like a dying flame. I glanced at Emily, her face pale but determined. For the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe we could finally end this nightmare. Maybe we could be free. But just as the creature seemed on the verge of disappearing, Marie's chanting faltered. She gasped, clutching her chest, her eyes wide with fear. "No," she cried. "It's too strong." The Wendigo seized the moment. With a final, desperate lunge, it broke through the barrier and attacked Marie. She screamed as its claws tore into her, her blood splattering the circle of candles. "Run," she screamed, her voice choked with pain. "Run now." Emily and I didn't need to be told twice. We bolted from the clearing, the Wendigo's howls echoing behind us. The forest seemed to close in around us, the trees twisting and writhing as if alive. We ran blindly, our hearts pounding, our lungs burning. We burst into another clearing, only to find ourselves back at the campsite where it all began. The shredded tent, the scattered supplies, it was as if no time had passed at all. The Wendigo was right behind us. It emerged from the shadows, its eyes glowing with triumph. We had nowhere left to run. Emily and I clung to each other, our last hope extinguished. The creature advanced slowly, savoring our terror. Its jagged teeth gleamed in the moonlight, its growls vibrating through our very bones. "This is it," I whispered, holding Emily tight. "I'm sorry. I love you." "I love you too," she replied, tears streaming down her face. Just then, I remembered the flare gun in my backpack. In a desperate move, I tore myself from Emily's grasp and lunged for the pack. The Wendigo, sensing the threat, charged at me. I barely had time to aim and fire. The flare hit the creature square in the chest, and it recoiled, howling in agony as flames engulfed it. Emily and I took the opportunity to run, not looking back as the creature writhed and screamed. We made it to the car and sped away, my heart pounding in my chest, adrenaline driving us forward. Epilogue: the aftermath. We drove through the night, not stopping until we reached the safety of a bustling town. We went straight to the police and told our story again. This time, they listened. They sent a team to Pine Hollow, but by the time they arrived, there was no trace of the Wendigo or the clearing where Marie had tried to help us. Dr. Thorne met us again, his face a mixture of relief and sorrow. He listened to our account and examined the claw marks on our car. "You were lucky," he said quietly. "The flare might have weakened it, but the Wendigo isn't easily destroyed." Emily and I knew better than to believe we were entirely safe. We moved far from Pine Hollow, but the fear never left us. We still perform the rituals Marie taught us, and our home is adorned with protective charms. Though we have scars, we survived to tell our story. The Wendigo is still out there, its hunger never sated, always searching for new victims. If you ever find yourself in Pine Hollow, remember our story. Stay away from the forest at night, and if you ever hear a low, guttural growl, run. Run and never look back. For the Wendigo is always hungry, and it will find you.